Aloha and welcome to Live at the Legislature. I'm Jill Kuramoto, and every week we sit down with our Hawaii state senators to talk about the events and issues that are happening at the Senate. And this morning we have Senator Willis Sparrow. He's the chair of the Senate Committee on Housing, and we also have our vice chair of the Senate Committee on Housing, Senator Breen Harimoto. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Jill.
I think if you ask anyone in the public what some of their top concerns are for the state, I think how homelessness and housing are going to be at the top of that list. And I think we all agree that they're sort of interrelated.
Yes.
So as chair of the Housing Committee, how do you plan to address affordable housing this session?
Well, key to affordable rentals is to have government subsidies. And we need to invest tax dollars in infrastructure and planning and construction. That's what we're going to do at one of our TOD projects, Mayor Right Housing. But millions of dollars over the next 10 years, hundreds of millions need to be invested by the government in order to build the affordable rentals, because it's only going to be the state government that's going to drive affordable rentals.
Exactly. So, well, let's talk about another issue about TOD. A recent report by the Hawaii Interagency Council for Transit-Oriented Development has identified more than 30 sites on Oahu that could be used for affordable housing along the rail transit line. So how do you plan to move the state forward addressing developing TOD projects?
Well, one of the exciting things is that TOD allows us to create these new vibrant communities around rail stations, and they will be mixed use, mixed income. And the good thing is that along the rail line, the state is one of the largest landowners. So we're trying to be sure that we don't miss this opportunity for affordable housing in those developments. And they have to be public-private partnerships, because the state cannot bear the entire cost.
Right.
Well, much of the development may not be able to be completed in 5, maybe 10 years. So how do you plan to move these projects forward much quicker, much faster?
Well, we are in discussion with the county, and there are state agencies that are working on how can we streamline the process. For example, one area we're looking at is historical properties, those properties with buildings that are 50 years or older, and how we could deal with those. We're also looking at the approvals with the Department of Planning and Permitting, because that's an area where many of the developers say that there's duplication and some unnecessary delays, but it's a collaboration between the state and the counties. But we certainly, as I said earlier, need to put more funds into housing, and one way we're hoping to do is to raise the money through the conveyance tax. Currently, we get 38% from the conveyance tax, which is on real estate sales, and we want to remove that cap of 38 million and percentage from 50% to 60%, and that alone will raise us millions of dollars that we could put into the affordable revolving trust fund, and a fund also DERF, which is used by developers to assist in their projects.
It's definitely a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's talk about housing and how also we need to balance natural resources, agricultural land. I know that's something that's important to you, Senator Harimoto.
Yes, that's a huge issue. Some people think that development is a bad thing, but in this case, I think it's a good thing. One of the core values we have in Hawaii, I believe, is keep the country country, and there's a good reason for that. So if we look at the opportunities of rail and TOD, this allows us to densify that urban core, to build these new vibrant communities around the rail stations where people can live, work, and play, and you can get along with maybe one car instead of 2 or 3, or maybe no cars. And the trade-off is that we can get those housing units in the urban core and save the country. We can keep the country. And I think that's a really huge trade-off.
Yes. And a key point to remember is in the next 50 years, Oahu alone may have an additional 300 to 400,000 new residents just in Honolulu. So we're at the tail end of the urban development on the west side where I live. And many of the homes will be built out there, but as Senator Harimoto said, rail is key to these high-density projects where people can live, work, play, and go to school. And it's actually going to be very exciting and vibrant, in my opinion, once that rail is up and running, and people are going to be very impressed with it. Although everyone's not happy with the cost because it was lowballed when it was approved, but at this stage, we have to build it. It's halfway done in terms of the main rail, and I foresee and we foresee that it's going to be a huge benefit 20 years from now, easily.
Okay, well, I know that last year the legislature appropriated about $50 million towards housing and funding for the rental housing revolving fund and the dwelling unit revolving fund, and also a significant amount of funds was appropriated for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to develop homes for their beneficiaries. And the governor in his State of the State address is asking for another $100 million to address housing. Do you think that's possible to do?
Well, I'll start off. Money is always an issue, but one of the biggest impediments to creating more affordable housing, or housing in general, is a lack of infrastructure, mainly sewers. So in the past, we had these mega developers that could pass the cost along to thousands of homes. And now with rail, we have smaller infill developments that the developers cannot pay. So government needs to step in, get the infrastructure in, so that developers can produce housing that we need.
Yeah, and personally, I think the $100 million that the governor is asking for is not enough. It's too low. We had a bill last session with a $2 billion bond. Those are the numbers we need to be thinking about if we're going to put a dent in the housing project, because one development alone can cost over $100 million in infrastructure, as Senator mentioned. And then when you're talking about island-wide or statewide and the neighbor islands, $2 billion doesn't go very far. It could be spent in a few years easily if we have the political will to do it. And we're hoping that we can get a much more than $100 million this year in order to take care of, to end homelessness and then to build some affordable rentals.
Well, I know that we could discuss this a lot more. And actually, there is a meeting tonight at the state capitol in the auditorium.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock to 5:30. The public is invited.
Yes, and we'll be talking about housing and some of the bills that we've introduced, and get a few comments from the public as well. We think this is the big issue of the day here at the legislature.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching Live at the Legislature. We'll see you next week.